So like I was saying, the reason that they're using such displays of force now is because they're kind of in an uncomfortable position. Remember how we talked yesterday about how being South Indian Christian puts you in this weird vice? And usually what happens is the first generation, if you're South Indian Christian, and the mainstream narrative of India is, we're all Hindus that are vegetarians and don't shower and are undersized and dark-skinned but with no sexual viability. The first thing that a first-generation person is going to do is beg for their master's approval. But and then the master is usually the missionary. So if you can get an English degree and use whatever advantage you have to scrape by and talk down to black people and Mexicans, that gives you kind of the Randall from Recess tattletale type of energy. So, Mark Phillips, who's those guys? Who are those guys? RDC World. They had the Hood Olympics, you remember? And the Patel kid was the guy that called the police on everybody. And that's how the Indians are supposed to act. We're supposed to call the police on the other minorities to prove how loyal we are to the master. And most of the problems I've had in my life are because that's a narrative that I never felt obligated to propagate or continue or perpetuate, rather. And so, while my mother and father were at University of Minnesota, Anoka Ramsey, Anoka Hennepin Technical College, Bethel University, a so-called Christian university where they started a chapel. All these Christian universities have chapel in their undergraduate program. My parents started a chapel in the adult program. Okay, so the people coming back, trying to get their certificates or whatever, these are the people that my parents were helping every day. White people serving the same people here that are giving me these facial expressions while they put sweaters on their dogs. Hey, look at this. There's a church on every corner celebrating a fake Jesus. Jesus was not white. I've said it before, Jesus looked more like me than anybody else. And the letter J in itself is a misnomer. And my dad has spoken about that as well. But that shows you that the core of this issue is spiritual. And as we approach this moment of convergence, they cannot truly look me in the eye anymore, which is why they need their numbers. They need their numbers and they need their corporations. And it's not the corporations, it's the parent companies. Literally, the corporations have to call their parents to enforce their system. It's not the sheriff's department themselves. It's not the agents of the department with the badge, the individual badges that want to carry out these things. They're just trying to make their ends meet. So trying to initiate combat with an individual has never been anything I've wanted to do. And, as I've told you before, do you see the name Mathai on any of my apparel? I spent a decade in Dallas. Everybody in Dallas wants to be considered a star. So they'll put their name on everything. They'll put their individual name on everything. A black woman will buy a wig based off of some drug dealer money that she's laundering, And then all of a sudden she feels like she's Beyonce. So she, will make some candles, or she'll make some, boutique dresses or whatever. That's the silliness of delusion. That's no different than Indian culture. That's no different than an Indian from the window, peeking through the curtain and calling the police on somebody just driving through the neighborhood or walking through the neighborhood in the hopes that will get them some endearment with their neighbors and HOA or whoever. My greatest crime in this country as a citizen has been vocalizing this hypocrisy. I've told you several times, I don't want to live here. And do you really think I haven't done enough to make money on YouTube to retire? Do you really think I get 2 views per video? Do you really think that Texas Movement Performance, with all the people that we've helped, and by we, I mean this guy, this one fucking guy, with all the millionaires and billionaires in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that we've touched in a proper way, you don't think enough work was done for me to have been able to buy a house and take care of the property taxes with simply the interest from a brokerage account by now? Isn't this just because of your sexual inadequacy? Isn't that why you wasn't that what the Richard Pryor skit was about at the gun shop? A white woman felt so confident coming into my place of rest, even though a court order would, deny entry legitimately, clearly marked. And she was the first to say, I'm a woman, as if that puts her on the same playing field spiritually as me. But she needed 3 bodyguards with guns, in addition to her own. And think of how many times Black Americans throughout the history of Illinois, throughout the history of this country, have had to deal with that kind of injustice when they're just trying to buy a home, when they're just trying to get a job, when they're just trying to keep a job. What right do I have to respond violently in these type of situations, even with $1 of liquidity, waiting for SNAP benefits? I had to budget $6 of SNAP benefits at the store, dollar store. And who knows what's in that food? So if I defecate during a unlawful entry of the residence in which I currently reside, realistically, in the spiritual realm, it's a badge of honor. And the scale of my opposition is a badge of honor. They know I hate moral victories. And so I document these moral victories as a sign of my emotional distress. I don't have a Jewish temperament. I don't calculate all these things for the purposes of a ledger or a spreadsheet that I can litigate in the future to get every cent back. Even though I'd greatly wish to see all the African Americans deserving of reparations receive every penny that they've earned or their ancestors have earned, I'm not the right man to properly account for all those things. The children are out here now, and this is what we call words of affirmation. This is like Indian words of affirmation. So when my father came back from India, as he was executing the document, and he got his down payment that should have partially gone to me, and he executed that document without my permission, without my approval, which is not what my mother intended. He wore hero. He never wore it before. He certainly never supported it, even when I made money within the first month. But when he got an opportunity to steal from me, then he was more than happy to use my brand, the brand that I bled for, the brand that I starved for, and the brand that my mother was killed for. He used that as a shield. As he uses her name as his shield now. As white women use Black America as their shield. As they use these children as their shield. As the Jewish community uses white people as their shield. When I was in Minnesota, that was the first time in 8th grade, I had the leverage to ask my parents to play football. And we were at Oakview Middle School, and the first game we played was against Carl Sandburg Middle School in Minnesota. So, this is a kill box by design. And children don't have to know how the world creates these kill boxes. It's only certain children that have to deal with it. But your conscience tells you which battles you're supposed to fight and which ones you're not. And what we're dealing with now is a world full of people that have spent a lifetime avoiding the battles that they knew they were supposed to fight, but they chose not to. Whether they were paid not to fight those battles, whether they were convinced by a significant other not to fight those battles, or whether they just cowered in fear. All my cowerings have been documented for the public. The problem that the authorities have is that there's only so much black credibility they can give to me. If they fully lynch me, they will give me all the power that they don't want me to have. So, we have to live our war in the awkward middle. Gym class heroes. J. Cole. Logic. Kendrick Lamar. Drake. Mulatto. Lauren London. Alicia Keys. Elon Musk likes to talk about first principles. The first principles is loyalty to your Father. First and foremost, our Father in heaven. First chapter of the Gospel of John, even if you believe the entire Bible's a lie, says, "In the beginning the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The whole humanity and divinity thing may be a fabrication, but the fact remains is what we speak influences our very existence here in the world. I'm not going to get into conspiracy theory or, Nikola Tesla alternating current versus direct current or whatever, vibrations and all. I don't feel confident enough to talk like that, but I know that there's a undulation when I sprint. I know that when I hit certain gears, there's a fluidity of the wavelength that happens. And we know, those of you in the culture know, you know the difference between a manufactured hit by Atlantic Records and an organic hit in the club played by a DJ that truly understands the culture. There's no rule book for this genuine hierarchy. We have to learn it organically. And the slave masters make you feel, especially if you come from the suburban environment, that rule book is set in stone and already established, like it's a law. But when you come into a place where you encounter love genuinely, you will realize that there is no law that cannot be overcome by love. So if you're in an environment that does not believe in love but only law, you will always be kind of disgruntled. You'll never be at peace. And that's why the people that live in those environments and call that home have a scowl on their face all the time. Look. They have to manufacture a heaven here on earth. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. No theft is forever. You can dress it up all you want. You can put lipstick on a pig, but a pig is still a pig. I look at the day's events. I don't know whether this morning's interference came because of the walk to the courthouse yesterday or the accepted filing of the emergency motion to stay by the Cook County judge. It's very clear that the legal representation is the one that formally requested it. But no lie will last forever. And this local node of enforcement is being manipulated by a higher node. And I've already called upon the authority that supersedes that higher node. So I may have to embrace the embarrassment for a little while longer. But that's how you finish a 400, children. Lactic acid builds up in the last home stretch. Your job is to maintain the form as best as you can. Keep lifting your feet. Keep lifting your hands. Stay in rhythm and sync. And make sure your forward momentum is working in your favor. When you're living in the middle, like when you're running a 200 or running the curve of a 4x1, the centripetal acceleration will pull you to the outside, but your body leans toward the inside. You lean from the ankles, but you contact the ground through your feet. You pump your arms, from the brain. All those things have to work in concert. So the white side of the world will pull you in one direction. The black side of the world will pull you in one direction. The Spanish-speaking side will make their choice either way, and you have to determine on a case-by-case basis whose side they're on. The Asians and Indians will seek the approval of whatever authority is in the room at the time. Who are you going to be? How are you going to make decisions? Your life is determined by how you act under duress. Anybody can be strong when they're wealthy, when they live in a gated community, when they're exclusively around their own racial group, when they have a gun in their holster, when they have mace, when they have body cameras. I'll go this way. Thank you, sir.
Since I'm here, I just want to make sure.
Calling upon religious authority is cheap also. It's not always Jesus' job to live your life. As we said before, faith without works is dead. And in engineering, you learn about a term called deformation. That happens when a material has been put under a load for so long that its very material properties change. So like, for example, if you had Play-Doh, it would just smash, right? But like an aluminum can, when you get it fresh out the box, it has no wrinkles or anything like that. But if you put enough pressure on an empty aluminum can, what happens? It crushes, and no amount of reinflating or reworking can take those deformations out. So when you take a model minority and you force them to make a moral decision, they're going to go to their deepest inner character. And most of you Malayalis, most of you Keralites, are showing who your real idols are. And the whole goal of this is they want to simultaneously broadcast my life to the world without giving Texas Movement Media the revenue generated from our side of the story. Even though everybody is interested in it, everybody's watching, everybody's clicking, and their business model is based off of clicks. Everybody was laughing when Hero first started. Noah Lyles was talking about how he was raised in a cult. Fred Curley went to PhysioFit to work out with Joey. Trayvon Bromell went and got his master's in divinity and started doing Bible studies on Instagram. Christian Coleman all of a sudden started fucking Sha'Carri Richardson to recreate the Marion Jones and Tim Montgomery power couple in track and field. Johnny Jackson faked a time to enter onto USATF, while the University of Houston faked a time to say that I ran the 200 at a certain meet. When you see 360 degrees of opposition, do you think one apology will end the suffering, will end the pain? The shock to my mother's heart was intended for me. Now we will shock my father's account, and we'll see how he likes it. My very existence is a shock to the heart of America. That's the gun in my holster. You can't kill me. So you try to lynch me slow. You know I despise Gandhi. So you try to starve me publicly. But that's the difference between Hindus and us. We can lay down our knife if the Lord asks us to. That's the truth about the Martin Luther King Jr. approach. It's not about taking abuse and bricks and thrown at you and so on and so forth for the sake of integrating at a white lunch table. White people don't make good food. It's about recognizing that people that seek to harm you or seek to end your life or life philosophy or the broadcasting of your spirit through your physical form, they do it at the behest of their master. They are slaves. So they will despise any kind of freedom. I told you about how my father despised my freedom. How Samson Sabu despises my freedom. How Joel Matthew of Fortress Consulting despises my freedom. Do you feel free, Joel? Do you feel free, Benson? There was a Nike commercial. I believe the name was Derek Redmond, who was part of the British 4x4 in '92. And they made a big stink about him pulling up in the 400. And he had the British black and American black, two very different things. He pulled his muscle halfway down the back straightaway when he was one of the favorites to win. And then his dad gets on the track, shaved face, overweight, just by happenstance wearing a Nike shirt. And while Derek is crying in front of the whole world, his daddy helps him cross the finish line. Do I look like I need my daddy to help me cross the finish line? Do I look like I need my mommy to come and save me? If all this is because I spit in the face of Sam Kaufman, I'll consider that better than any suicide by cop. In the movie Zero Dark 30, they were at a black site where they did their Guantanamo Bay torture to the terrorist suspects. And they mocked Islam and the Islamic tradition by, after starving and torturing the so-called suspects, stripping them naked, knowing that the cold air and the trauma shrinks the penis to its smallest form out of protection. And then they brought in their white female counterpart to observe. You want her to see your dick. As if the approval of a white woman's, the sexual approval of a white woman is the highest standard of perfection in America. I'm not your buck. I'm not your slave. Your sexual approval and your pool boy fantasy means nothing to me. That is the shock to your heart, that I speak all the truth that you've built this lie of a country on. And you can't take Pornhub.com down now. You need it. And all the kids know what you're up to now. And if you do anything to me, I will be immortal. So you might as well pay me to go away.